While much of Washington's attention is locked on the Middle East, the tempo in the Western Pacific is rising, and the South China Sea is again the place where rival power projections collide. Over 4 days from April 9th through April 12th, the United States, Australia, and the Philippines carried out another round of coordinated maritime activity in contested waters. The second such combined exercise involving those three partners this year. Warships, fighter aircraft, and surveillance platforms operated in the same battle space, practicing how they would detect, track, and respond to threats at sea and in the air, while building the kind of interoperability that matters when crises compress decision time. The message was straightforward. Regional partners are tightening their coordination, and they intend to be present together in waters where China insists outsiders should stay away. For Manila, the exercises were framed as capacity building and deterrence, an effort to strengthen maritime defense, improve coordination across services, and show that treaty commitments are not theoretical. For Washington and Canberra, it was another visible demonstration that freedom of navigation is not simply asserted in diplomatic statements. It is exercised in real time with assets in motion. The mix of participating aircraft and ships underscored how serious these events have become. Philippine FA-50 fighter jets flew as part of the package alongside other Philippine air and maritime platforms. Australia contributed a P-8A Poseidon, a high-end maritime patrol aircraft designed to hunt submarines and track surface vessels over long distances. The United States deployed the USS Ashland, a dock landing ship that signals an ability to support amphibious and logistics operations, the kind of ship that becomes highly relevant in a fast-moving regional emergency. Taken together, it was not the largest display of force in the region, but it was the kind of practical, repeatable cooperation that builds habits, and habits become options when tensions spike. These 4 days also landed on the calendar just ahead of something bigger, the annual Balikatan exercises, scheduled to begin on April 20th and expected to be among the largest iterations in years. The growing scale of Balikatan matters not only for training value, but for what it implies. The Indo-Pacific security network is thickening, and multiple countries that once kept a careful distance from direct participation are now stepping closer. One of the clearest examples is Japan. In a major shift for Tokyo's posture, combat-capable Japanese ground troops are deploying to the Philippines in connection with the expanding slate of joint drills. The first time Japanese combat-ready forces have been on Philippine soil in this context since World War II. It is a move that would have been politically unthinkable for decades, and it lands at a moment when Japan's security policy is already in transitio. And with a sharper focus on deterrence, long-range capabilities, and deeper alignment with partners who share concerns about China's expanding reach. The significance goes beyond symbolism. Japan's participation as a full partner in major exercises signals a willingness to operate closer to potential flashpoints and to accept the political risks that come with that visibility. It also reflects an assessment in Tokyo that the region's security environment is changing faster than old constraints can manage. In practical terms, a more forward-leaning Japan helps close gaps that would otherwise widen if the United States is stretched across multiple theaters. When American attention and resources are pulled toward crises elsewhere, partners are pressed to fill space diplomatically, militarily, and operationally to prevent a vacuum that an adversary could exploit. That dynamic is now an open topic in regional security circles. Not whether the United States remains committed, but how. Much bandwidth it can devote at any one time, and how quickly allies can coordinate if two crises erupt at once. China is watching this, and it is answering in its own language: presence. During the same 4-day window as the U.S., Australia, Philippines maritime activity, China's People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command confirmed it conducted routine patrols in the South China Sea. And Beijing's criticism was aimed as much at Manila as at Washington. A Chinese military spokesperson described the Allied patrols and exercises as provocation, arguing that the Philippines was bringing in outside powers to inflame the situation. He said recently the Philippines has repeatedly invited countries outside the region to organize so-called joint patrols. For the United States and its partners, the argument is that these waters are international and that military and civilian traffic has the right to operate. They're under international law. Their activities are described as defensive, stabilizing, and designed to preserve a rules-based order. For China, the framing is the opposite. Allied patrols are portrayed as destabilizing interference by extraterritorial forces, part of a containment strategy meant to box China in along the arc of islands running from Japan down through Taiwan and the Philippines. What strategists often call the first island chain. It is not just a debate about ships and aircraft. It is a debate about who sets the rules in Asia's most critical sea lanes and how far China can push to make its claims feel like facts. Because while drills play out above the waterline, the deeper, longer-term contest is increasingly built, literally out of sand, concrete, and steel. After years in which the most dramatic phase of China's artificial island building seemed to have slowed, new construction activity is again drawing attention, this time in the Paracel Islands, FA. Farther north in the more frequently discussed Spratly chain, at a feature known as Antelope Reef, satellite imagery has shown rapid changes, expanded land, fresh structures, and infrastructure that appears designed to support sustained operations. Analysts tracking the site describe jetties, a helipad, multiple buildings, and a newly shaped coastline with the kind of geometry that raises a familiar question in the South China Sea. Is this being built to support a runway or the precursors of one? The details matter because the Paracels occupy a strategic position closer to China's mainland than the Spratly outposts, and therefore easier to supply and reinforce. In a high-intensity conflict, distance becomes vulnerability. A base that is closer to home is harder to isolate and easier to protect with layered air defenses, maritime patrols, and quick reaction forces. In other words, if you are building for endurance under pressure, geography matters, and the Paracels offer China advantages that its southern holdings do not. The construction also matters politically because the Paracels are disputed. China holds them firmly, but Vietnam and Taiwan also claim them, and Vietnam in particular is not treating this as a routine development. Hanoi has formally protested the activity. A Vietnamese foreign ministry spokeswoman condemned the construction and challenged its legitimacy, arguing that actions taken without Vietnam's consent have no standing. She said any foreign activities in the waters without Vietnam's permission were completely illegal and invalid. China's response is the familiar assertion of sovereignty that the Paracels, which Beijing calls the Shisha Islands, are inherently Chinese territory and that construction is therefore domestic development, not escalation. Chinese officials have repeatedly framed such projects as improvements for living conditions and economic development, language that casts the outpost as normal governance rather than militarization. But the region has heard that phrasing before, and the track record is hard to ignore. Reclaimed land followed by hardened facilities, sensors, and deployments that extend China's ability to monitor and control surrounding waters. Analysts who follow the imagery say Antelope Reef could be on a trajectory toward becoming a major outpost, potentially one of China's largest in the area. Some reporting and analysis has estimated the scale of reclamation at roughly 1,490 acres, approaching the footprint of other massive Chinese-built installations in the Spratlys, such as Mischief Reef. Even without a runway, land of that size can host radars, communications arrays, missile systems, and logistics facilities. And it can support a persistent Coast Guard and maritime militia presence, the gray zone force that often operates below the threshold of outright naval conflict, but still changes realities on the water. There is also a tactical dimension, a dredged lag. Own and reinforced jetties can offer sheltered berthing for vessels and possibly support operations by larger ships. If designed for dual-use purposes, such facilities could serve civilian shipping on paper while providing military flexibility in practice. This is how outposts become leverage. The broader strategic concern is that China's island and reef buildup is not just about the South China Sea itself. It is also about shaping a battle space around Taiwan. The sea lanes and air quarters in this region would be central in any attempt to blockade Taiwan, enforce exclusion zones, or complicate U.S. and allied access in a crisis. From Washington's perspective, the South China Sea is a testing ground. If China can turn contested waters into an effectively controlled zone through incremental steps, dredging, basing, patrols, coercion, then that model could be expanded elsewhere. That is why the United States continues to challenge China's claims through presence operations and why it has strengthened security commitments with partners like the Philippines. But the South China Sea is not a simple two-player contest. Vietnam has been building too, particularly in the Spratly Islands farther south. In recent years, Vietnam has expanded and fortified its own holdings, reclaiming land and constructing facilities that improve its ability to sustain forces and assert claims. That activity has not matched the scale of China's earlier island-building blitz, but it has been notable enough to draw attention and potentially a response. Some analysts see China's renewed intensity at Antelope Reef as a signal to Vietnam as much as to anyone else, a reminder that Beijing can build larger, faster, and with fewer constraints, and that it is willing to escalate construction if it feels challenged. A researcher with the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative described the renewed pace as a real change from recent years. Asterisk, he said, this is the first time in a long T, IMA, that they have reopened this basket of being able to build islands extremely large and extremely quickly. Asker, and he suggested it could be a message that China is not prepared to be outbuilt by any rival claimant. This is the anatomy of escalation in the South China Sea. Not necessarily a single dramatic clash, but overlapping actions that steadily raise the baseline. On one side, more multinational patrols, more exercises, more interoperability, and more public signaling that treaty allies will show up. On the other, more construction, more patrols, more assertions of sovereignty, and sharper warnings that outside powers are stirring up trouble. Hovering over it all is an unresolved legal and political reality. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague rejected the legal basis of China's sweeping maritime claims, ruling that China had no legal basis to claim historic rights to resources within areas covered by the so-called Nine-Dash Line. China rejected that decision, and the ruling did not settle sovereignty over land features, but it remains a key reference point for the Philippines and other states that argue international law does not support Beijing's broad claims. Still, legal arguments do not stop dredgers, and construction does not pause for diplomacy. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of today's South China Sea tension. The most decisive moves are often the quietest: a new jetty here, a widened shoreline there, a helipad, then a radar, then hardened shelters. The steps can be incremental, but the end state is transformational. At the same time, the Allied exercise calendar is growing more crowded. Each new drill becomes both preparation and messaging, reassurance for partners, deterrence for rivals, and, depending on who is watching, provocation. There is also the risk of miscalculation. With more ships and aircraft operating in close proximity, the probability of an incident rises and aggressive intercept occur. Lishin, a warning shot, a dangerous maneuver that goes viral and forces leaders into harder positions. The South China Sea has already seen close encounters between Coast Guard vessels and fishing boats, between patrol ships and resupply missions, between aircraft and aircraft. The region does not need a deliberate decision to escalate for a crisis to ignite. It may only need a mistake. And beyond the South China Sea itself, the strategic question is becoming harder to avoid. What happens if the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East both demand sustained attention at the same time? That question helps explain why allies are stepping forward more visibly. It helps explain why Japan's role is expanding, why Australia is investing more in long-range surveillance and deterrence, and why the Philippines is inviting more partners into its maritime posture. It also helps explain why China is pushing back so forcefully, because Beijing sees a tightening coalition forming along its maritime purr. iFerry. For now, the pattern is clear. More joint patrols, more ships, more aircraft, more dredging, more bases, more claims asserted as permanence. And the contest is increasingly happening on two clocks at once: the immediate visible clock of drills and patrols, and the slower but more consequential clock of construction that turns reefs into outposts. The Pacific, as this week's activity makes plain, is not waiting for other conflicts to cool down. It is moving on its own timetable, and that timetable is accelerating.